Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to SMM Connect. And I'd also like to welcome our members from Training Mag Network. Today's event, Creating Sales Presentations to Beat Buyer Indecision with Richard Goring, the director at Bright Carbon. My name is Sandy Masters. I'll help you out in chat if I can. And we do hope that you'll join us in November. On the 5th, we have Carmen Simon for the neuroscience of memorable content. On November 6th, we have Catherine Landis on the topic of embracing generational diversity in today's hybrid work environment. And then on November 7th, we have Michael Leinbach and David Yesford for Transform Your Sales Strategy. Join the 25% who excel in selling to value. All of this can be found at smmconnect.com/calendar. You can click the link right there on the screen if you want to open up another browser window. And of course, you'll want to join us again because Richard Goring is coming back on November 19th for impactful visual storytelling in PowerPoint to banish bullet points. I would love to banish bullet points. If you are on social media, X is the place to find us for the latest in white papers and webinars and events that you'll want to know about. Follow at SMM Connect Us, and you will be connected. There is also the ability to sign up for Sales and Marketing Magazine. It's actually, they're called SMM Focus Reports, and these are topics that your counterparts are talking about. So you can go to salesandmarketing.com/subscribe. I'll put that in the chat as well. It is my pleasure and privilege to welcome back to SMM Connect Richard Goring. And while he gets his slides set up through screen sharing, I just want to make a comment. If we do get into demo mode towards the end of the presentation and you want to see the slides bigger, look in the upper right corner. There's a go full screen button that is a square with brackets around it. And to get out of full screen mode, you just hit the escape key. It'll bring you back to the chat area. So having said that, your screen looks great. And Richard, welcome back.
Wonderful, Sandy. Thanks so much. And hi, everyone. Welcome into the session where we have the pleasure today of sharing with you all sorts of different things to do about sales presentations, and specifically in this instance, how to overcome one of the biggest barriers to being successful that you'll probably face. Now, maybe you've been in a position before where you have a killer sales presentation, but you lose the sale. Did you know that in all likelihood, you haven't lost to a competitor, but you've actually lost to something else entirely? Let me introduce you to the victor. This ugly looking creature is the status quo. Where you advocate for change and something new and fresh, the status quo will sidle up to your prospects, smelling of stale mothballs, and tells them that things really aren't all that bad. And come on now, there's no need for any rash decisions. But even though we can't all see how ugly the status quo is, it can be really very compelling for a prospect and can stop your sales pitch dead in its tracks. So in this session, I'm going to teach you how you can overcome indecision and beat the status quo for good. We'll start with a recap of the challenger sales method, the go-to approach for many successful sales reps, and then take a look at those instances where even the most compelling sales approaches might not be enough, why we keep losing to the status quo, and finally, we'll look at what we can do about it to overcome indecision in the audience. So I wanted to start with that recap. In terms of building things up, about 10 years ago or so, we learned that the best salespeople were challengers. They brought disruptive insights that challenged the status quo and reframed their prospects' thinking. And this approach around being a challenger became the best practice for sales presentations. Early stage sales presentations need to answer the question, why change? By doing so, they challenge the status quo and get prospects thinking about how the world has changed and why they need to change now too. For example, an effective way of selling a new category of product or service is to explain what's wrong with the status quo and then show the problems that can present themselves by continuing to do things the same old way. Prospects might be missing out, facing risks, losing money, or perhaps all three. To give an example, consider a cloud accounting software vendor. They can explain how doing everything on premise means more work for the end user, so now the status quo translates into wasted time and money and also prevents effective collaboration between offices. An effective challenger sales presentation is made up of different building blocks that come together to tell a compelling and persuasive story. So to see them in action, I wanted to take a look at an example of a company that's created a centralized banking app. Now, the background for this, just to help us figure it all out, is that the app allows users to add multiple accounts from different places so that they can do their banking in one place. And the company is looking to recruit smaller, aptly named challenger banks to join them. So the first thing you need is measurable insight to grab attention and get the prospect to realize that you can add value in your meeting. And so, in this case, the banking app presentation would open by setting the scene with industry statistics to show their insight and expertise. Next, you build on that insight to show that the status quo isn't safe. Ignoring an issue brings risks or losses or perhaps being left behind. You need to make it clear that the fact that the status quo is no longer safe isn't the fault of the prospect. They aren't stupid for finding themselves where they are. You don't want them to get defensive. Rather, the world has slowly changed and now they need to change too. So for the banking app company, to show that the status quo isn't safe, they tell a story about big banks becoming both more specialized and more general. So not only are they offering a wider range of services than ever before, they're also offering more specialized services in a bid to make themselves one-stop shops for banking and meet all the needs of a customer from a single provider. And then, to emphasize that this isn't the fault of the challenger banks, you can say that although previously challenger banks had the edge when it came to app-based banking services, the bigger banks have caught up. And since they now offer an array of app-based options and a wider range of services and solutions, the challenger banks are finding it harder to stand out from the crowd and to differentiate from such formidable competition. And then here's where you offer the light at the end of the tunnel. You contrast the unsafe status quo with the shiny and beautiful new world that's possible. You don't directly talk about your solution at this point, but rather about the category that your solution sits within. And so for the banking app, we do that by talking about what's actually going on with consumers. They don't really want everything from one provider. In fact, 25% of people already have accounts with more than one bank. What we're actually seeing is that it's just an appetite to be able to access everything in one place. And so here we can introduce our exciting new world. Think of it like a food market. You can grab an appetizer from one vendor, your main from another, your dessert from a third, and a drink from a fourth. Rather than competing directly for customers or diluting your offering to match bigger banks, what if you could embrace the changing landscape and support customers in their desire to diversify, all within one app? And so that's the approach that we want to take. You then bring all of this together to make your claims believable. You try to show that changing does deliver what you say it will. Less risk, lower costs, greater revenue, and you do that with stories, testimonials, maybe analyst insights, or even customer data. And so to conclude the banking app story, you can bring in the profiles of 3 potential users of the app to show the opportunity on offer and what the potential could be. This challenger model for sales and for sales presentations specifically has become really widespread. Yet according to Matthew Dixon, who's the author of The Challenger Sale and also a newer book called The Jolt Effect, around 40 to 60% of deals today end up stalled in no decision. In other words, everyone learned how to disrupt the status quo, how to be a challenger, but the status quo is still winning. To understand what's going on, let's just look at the next topic. Some of the time, when we lose to the status quo, what's happening is that the prospect is evaluating their options and actively deciding that their current way of doing things is better than the alternative that's been presented. sellers can repeat their arguments, trying to